I still keep a paper ledger on my desk, though every bank I've dealt with in the last decade would prefer I let the cloud remember for me. The ledger is a habit from my years as a financial manager: neat columns, black ink for inflows, red for outflows, a pencil margin for notes I can erase later. I keep time the same way: written grids of days, clean lines to hold what I can, little fences against chaos. At 68, those fences aren't just habit, they're a promise to myself that carefulness still matters. My house in the suburbs isn't grand, but it is ordered. The grass knows the length I like. The gutters are clear. The gutters have been clear since 2011, when a storm loosened a fascia board and I swore I'd never let neglect embarrass me again. Inside, the silverware faces the same direction, blades inward. Shoes wait in pairs by the door, laces tucked. A safe sits bolted into the hall closet behind the winter coats, its combination distinct from everything else I own. I change the code every equinox, a private ritual that makes me feel in step with the world. Some say meticulousness is another name for fear. Maybe. What I know is that meticulousness has kept me from the drift that swallowed my father in his last years. I watched him wander past unpaid bills, his wallet gone soft with receipts, all that precision he taught me blown away by forgetting. He had been a careful man until the end, when he could no longer be careful. That's when I started writing everything down twice. My son, Daniel, is 36. He used to tease me for the ledger. When he was a boy, I turned balancing the checkbook into a math game and slipped him $1 for every discrepancy he found. He grew up laughing at my rituals, and I didn't mind. Teasing implies familiarity. But something changed when he turned 30 and his marriage to Tessa began to fray. She was a sharp woman, younger than him by 3 years, who could turn a compliment into a demand without raising her voice. Even after their divorce, the two of them talked more than divorced people should. Tessa once worked part-time at a title company. She understood the legal corners of property like an athlete understands a field. I liked her at first. She brought pies she didn't bake and asked questions with the patience of a surgeon. When they split, she kept orbiting Daniel like a moon that didn't know the tide had ended. Maybe that's unkind. Maybe they were just familiar. But I began to notice that any time Daniel spoke about the future, Tessa's phrases fell out of his mouth. Last year, on a Tuesday in late spring, May, I think, the ledger will tell you, I asked my lawyer, Daria, to help me revise my will. I'd made one in my 50s to keep the state from doing what families should, but life clarifies, and so does the behavior of people in it. Daria is a former prosecutor who learned the private sector pays for the same attention she used to give to motives. She's unafraid of silence. When we sat down in her office, I explained what I needed. I want the will to do more than divide, I said. I want it to remind. She smiled without showing teeth. You're thinking of a condition. Not money for a trick, I said. Not a hoop to jump through. I want decency. Respectful treatment. Not just of me, but of one another. I don't want to write money into anyone's cruelty. Daria leaned back. It can't be vague. Judges don't like vagueness. You can require something like regular contact, or prohibit certain conduct. But respect needs evidence. I understand, I said, and then I surprised both of us. What if we record something? She tilted her head. That afternoon she took me to a notary she trusts 2 blocks away, and there we made a video. I stated my name, birth date, and the date of the recording. I said I was not under duress, that I understood the contents of my will, and that I was including a clause that would disinherit any beneficiary who engaged in harassment, coercion, or exploitation of my person, or of any other beneficiary, as determined by my executor, with supporting evidence such as messages, recordings, or testimony. I used my own words carefully. After, the notary sealed a copy of the video to the will, and Daria kept a digital twin on an encrypted drive. Hidden but not secret, Daria said. If someone challenges, we have the record. Let's not advertise it, I said. Let's just be clear. Clear. That was the word. Clarity is my discipline. Clarity asks for less interpretation later, and when your hands shake, interpretation is a bad place to live. Daniel did not know about the video. He knew vaguely that I had a will, because he once mocked me for the binder with tabbed sections, assets, liabilities, insurance, contacts, wishes. "Dad, you've got a Sunday bar for paperwork?" he said, laughing. But he never asked what was in it. Tessa did, though, once, with a soft approach. We were at a barbecue at my neighbor's house. She handed me a paper plate and said, "You've done such a good job with your life. It would be nice to learn from how you plan." Innocent words, hungry eyes. I told her estate planning was mostly about boring conversations with yourself. A year passed. The hedges stayed clipped. I turned 68 in February and celebrated by replacing my safes combination with the square of my age. Daniel called. Tessa did not. None of that seemed meaningful at the time. But entries in a ledger don't show their patterns until after. You plot things and then connect them with a ruler, and see you've drawn a shape you didn't intend. The shape this time was pressure. The first message was simple. "Dad, can we talk about something administrative?" I said yes, and we set dinner for Sunday. I ironed napkins and folded them in triangles. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil, and the roast I always pretend is more complicated than it is. I placed the binder on the credenza without thinking. It belongs there, and everything belongs where it belongs. When they arrived, Daniel with shoulders rounded by apologies he hadn't made yet, Tessa with a box of bakery cookies. She looked at the binder the way a cat watches a fishbowl. "Let's eat," I said. "No business on an empty stomach." "Of course," Tessa said, first to agree. Daniel nodded. We ate. We laughed. Daniel told a story about a client who insisted on paying by mailing cash. Tessa made a face and said, "You'd be shocked how often people misunderstand paperwork." Each sentence felt sanded to an edge. After dishes, Daniel sat forward. "Dad, Tessa mentioned something that might save us all some time and hassle." "Us all?" I said lightly. "Estate things," Tessa said, as if she'd been invited. "We had a case at the office where a temporary power of attorney saved a family from a lot of trouble. Just for practical matters. Medical forms, a few signatures. Nothing big." "Temporary," Daniel repeated. "Just to make life easier if, anything comes up." I looked at the two of them, their words braided together, their eyes on me like well-trained hounds waiting for a signal. I took a breath and refolded my napkin along its crease. I am a man who believes in ease where ease is earned. I am also a man who hears the pressure under. "Just. Thank you," I said. "I'll think about it." Tessa smiled. "Of course. We even brought a template so you could see how straightforward it is." She slid a manila envelope across the table. I didn't touch it. Instead, I asked Daniel to tell me about his week. If meticulousness is my fence, patience is my gate. But as they spoke, I felt the ledger in my mind open to a new page, a new column labeled pressure, and I began to note the date. The envelope waited on my credenza for 3 days, a beige animal I didn't feed. On the 4th, I put on my reading glasses and slid the papers out. The header said, "Limited durable power of attorney," in a font that wanted to seem reasonable. Words do that, disguise themselves as helpers. I read line by line and traced each sentence with my finger so I could feel it. Limited was true for half a page. Durable meant it would outlast anything but my revocation. Temporary, as Tessa had said, appeared nowhere. I circled the agent's name, Daniel. Secondary agent, Tessa. That, I admit, I set the pen down for. An ex-daughter-in-law listed as my fallback authority. Practical, Tessa would have called it. Efficient. Familiar. The way a hand becomes familiar even after it has let go of yours. I made tea. I opened my drawer of sticky notes, and labeled the sections that concerned me. Then I called Daria. "Don't sign anything," she said, not as a threat but as rhythm. "Bring it." "I wasn't planning to," I said. "But I want to be careful without being dramatic." "That's why you called me," she said. "Come in tomorrow. And stop being grateful for being careful. Being careful is the floor." Her office has windows that let in more sky than is polite. I laid the packet on her desk and watched her eyes move. She has prosecutor eyes that parse motive like a spreadsheet. When she reached the agent names, her eyebrow twitched. "Temporary," I said. "Not in any way that binds them," she said. "This is broad enough to chew through the walls." I nodded. I told her about dinner. I told her about the word just. People who ask for power do not like details, she said. The strong ones don't need to say just. They show you the what and the why and wait for your yes because they know you have one. What does a weak one do? Crowds you, she said. Makes you feel rude for taking your time. We talked about my son. She asked questions that were knives wrapped in cloth. I answered carefully. I did not want to turn my son into a defendant in my mouth. I said I loved him. I said he was impressionable and proud, which is a dangerous pairing. I said Tessa had a way of translating needs into virtues. She's not the first to do it, Daria said. But she's practiced. She tapped her pen. You're healthy. You're lucid. There's no reason for you to grant anyone this authority now. I agree, I said. But I'm not interested in a fight. You may not get to choose that, she said, and turned to her screen. If they apply pressure, we document it. Boundary setting is not provocation, it's inventory. Inventory felt like a word I could use. She helped me sketch a plan. I would say no without explaining myself. I would decline to open my safe, which they'd also mentioned, casually, as if the key to a safe were a car key anyone could fetch. I would invite conversation in writing, polite, neutral, brief. And I would keep records. If the pressure escalated, we would schedule a family meeting at her office to review my estate plan. Not a reading of a dead man's will, more of a living demonstration that my wishes had shape and consequence. You'll be accused of making things difficult, Daria said. You must be willing to seem difficult in order to be responsible. On the way home, I stopped at the pharmacy and bought a spiral notebook with a hard cover. The clerk asked if I needed a bag. I said no. Bags get crumpled and wander. I put the notebook on the kitchen counter and wrote on the first line, pressure log. Date. Time. Person present. Summary. Tone. Evidence collected. That evening, Daniel texted, "Did you get a chance to look over the temporary POA?" I replied, "I prefer not to sign anything at this time. Please communicate by text or email so I can keep track of details." He didn't respond. 10 minutes later, Tessa wrote, "Totally understand. What if we just pop by tomorrow and answer questions?" I wrote back, "No need to come by. If there are questions, send them here." Daria once said that people who intend to control a process hate being asked to write things down. Writing asks you to own your words. It freezes manipulation mid-gesture. That's why I keep ledgers. That's why the notary's office felt like church. The old man in me believes paper can bless conduct. At 10:43 p.m., Daniel tried again. "Dad, this is just smart. If you end up in the hospital," I let the line hang and typed, "I am well. If I become unwell, I will consult my attorney and doctor. Please respect my decision." Then I put the phone face down and turned off the kitchen light. The next morning, Tessa sent an email. The subject line, practicalities. The body was a cardigan of concern. She mentioned an acquaintance who'd been caught in a paperwork nightmare when her father was unexpectedly incapacitated. She said she admired my thoroughness and wanted to harmonize with it. She attached another form, this one titled Safe Access Authorization, which was a fancy name for "Give me the combination." She wrote, "We could just open the safe now to make sure everything is in order, and then we don't have to bother you with it later." "Bother me with it later," I said aloud, though no one was in the room. I printed the email and added it to a red folder labeled Pressure. I stapled a sticky note to the top, +1. Over the next week, they pressed, then paused, then pressed. Tessa has a talent for changing temperature without changing tone. One day she wrote, "Of course, you're right to be cautious." The next she sent Daniel to call me with his voice full of wounded logic. "Do you not trust me?" Trust, like just, is a word that asks for surrender. I told him I trusted him to be my son. That was the shape of the trust one had, and it was not small. Meanwhile, I tightened my house. I changed the safe combination at my kitchen table with a winter coat draped over my chair like a watching relative. I put a second deadbolt on the back door. I scanned the contents of the safe, a neat collection of documents with names that could end arguments: deed, title, policy, will. I checked the flash drive where Daria had stored the notary video and tested it twice, as if clicking a file could be practice for resolve. On Saturday morning, I texted Daniel, "Let's schedule a meeting with my attorney to review my estate plan. The date should work for you so you feel informed. That way we can stop talking about hypothetical emergencies." He replied, "If that's what you need." Tessa wrote separately, "Thrilled you're being proactive. Maybe we really can get these annoying tasks done." I vacuumed the hallway and thought about the word annoying. You can tell what people respect by what they call annoying. I stopped explaining. My generation was raised to narrate our choices as a way to remain lovable. But explaining invites negotiation. I kept quiet without being secretive. I said no without saying why. When Daniel showed up at my door unannounced, twice, I opened it, stood on the threshold, and said, "Now is not a good time." And then closed it, soft as linen. I wrote the time in the pressure log. When he phoned, I let most calls go to voicemail and responded with a clear text. Some of his messages I saved in 3 places: on my phone, on my computer, and printed in the red folder. Tessa shifted to emails that avoided verbs. It would be helpful if. We were thinking maybe. Could there be a way? You can drown in ellipses. I wore a life jacket of periods. No. Not now. Not necessary. Daria coached me to collect without commentary. Screenshots should include timestamps. If a message arrived with a threatening undertone, she taught me to reply in a way that drew that undertone to the surface. Please clarify what you mean by. Sooner is better before things get complicated. It's odd coaxing someone to say the quiet part out loud. But that's what evidence is, bringing the quiet part to court. On Tuesday, Tessa wrote, "The bank needs a letter authorizing Daniel to access certain statements, purely for reconciliation." I called my bank instead. The woman on the phone recognized my habit of anniversaries and asked after my February birthday. I asked her to flag my accounts for notes. No changes without my direct authorization. She added a password phrase only I knew, an old accounting professor's middle name, and then we both laughed at how ridiculous it sounded. Ridiculous is also protective. By Wednesday, the pressure got creative. Daniel sent me a photo of a medical bracelet with my name on it. "Just a gag," he said when I didn't respond right away. Then, "But seriously, you know hospitals can be a nightmare if we're not prepared." I replied, "If I am hospitalized, you will be contacted. Until then, please stop asking for authority you do not need." He called immediately, but the call dropped into voicemail like a stone into a bucket. He filled the bucket. "Dad, you're making me feel like a criminal. This is insulting. Tessa is just trying to help." I called Daria and read 3 of the messages to her. "Good," she said. "They hang themselves with this much rope." "Hang is a strong word," I said. "So is forfeit," she replied. "Do you want me to schedule the meeting?" I hesitated, not because I didn't want the meeting, but because I had an old man's desire to offer grace until the last minute. Mercy is my reflex. But mercy without boundary is how people practice on you. "Schedule it," I said. "Soon." We agreed on a date 2 weeks out, a Thursday afternoon in her office with the 2 honest windows. She sent formal invitations with a subject line that made my heart snap to attention: estate plan review, attendance requested. She copied Daniel and Tessa. The body of the email was dry as straw: date, time, location, purpose. She wrote, "We will review the structure of Mr. Klein's will, powers, and current assignments. No action is required of invitees. Please be on time." Daniel's reply arrived within the hour: "What's the point of this?" Tessa wrote, "Thank you for being thorough, Daria. We look forward to aligning." Aligning is a word that makes me picture railroad tracks, and I don't like standing on them. I spent the next days doing what I do best: inventory. I assembled the pressure folder so that the emails and messages told a story even a stranger would understand. I wrote dates and page numbers in pencil. I included a copy of the template they'd offered, with my circles around durable and agent. I wrote a brief note to myself outlining my reasons for not signing. I am healthy. I have a primary care physician who can advise me if that changes. I have an attorney. I am competent. I decline. A paragraph like that can hold your spine when your son's voice tries to melt it. I also made a checklist for the house. The safe checked. The back door locked. The garage code changed. Not because I feared burglary, but because pressure comes in through unlocked places. I slept well, because sleeping well is a choice you practice. I meditated, not with candles, but with my breath while I wiped the kitchen counters. Cleanliness is a sacrament where I come from. On Sunday, Daniel appeared again with Tessa half a step behind. I opened the door and put my hand on the jamb as if greeting a business acquaintance. "I wish you told us about the meeting," he said. "I did," I said. "On Thursday." "I mean earlier," he said. "You're here now," Tessa said brightly, cutting off the echo of his complaint. "We could just—" "Not today," I said. "Send what you need to say in writing." "Dad," Daniel said, cheeks flushed, "this is ridiculous. We're family." "That's why I'm being careful," I said. "I will not open the safe. I will not sign anything. I will see you Thursday." He stared at me with a look I recognized from his childhood when he realized a toy wasn't his to take. Tessa touched his arm. "Respectfully," she said. "We'll see you then." Respectfully. I tasted the word like a coin. When they left, I sat at the table and wrote the interaction into the log verbatim as best I could remember. I added a line, tone insistent, Tessa moderating, Daniel agitated. Then I stood, rinsed my cup, and put it upside down on the rack. I whispered to the quiet house. "We'll be fine. Houses listen, you know. At least mine does. It knows the difference between quiet that's peace and quiet that's held breath. This was the latter, but it was still mine. People think of safes as symbols of secrecy. For me, the safe is a symbol of breath. When you bolt something heavy to the bones of your house and tuck your important papers inside, you buy yourself a long inhale. Knowing I can exhale slowly gives me a better chance of saying yes to other things. A safe doesn't hide, it organizes permission. 2 days before the meeting, Daniel called me at 8:02 a.m. The time felt tactical. "I'm coming by," he said. "We need to clear the air before Thursday." "I'll be out," I said, not lying because I made it true by leaving. I drove to the park with my ledger, a pen, and a thermos of coffee. Birds practice riffs in the trees. I made a list titled, "What I Won't Debate." The list had 3 items. 1. Whether I'm allowed to set boundaries. 2. Whether love requires surrender of decision-making. 3. Whether ease for others is more important than safety for me. Underline once. Date it. When I returned, a post-it note was stuck to my door at eye level. "Please don't make this harder than it is." No signature. The handwriting was Tessa's, efficient and round, the way people write who learned on forms. I peeled it off, stuck it inside my log, and photographed my door to preserve the absence it left behind. Absence is evidence too sometimes. That evening, a group text arrived. Tessa had attached an agenda for Thursday, review of emergency protocols, review of asset location, confirmation of safe contents. I stared at the word confirmation as if it could confess, and then I wrote back, "The meeting is to receive information from my attorney. There will be no confirmations." Daria, who was copied, replied correct. "I will be leading the meeting. See you then." At 11:14 p.m., my phone rang. "Daniel." I answered this one. "Why are you doing this?" he said, his voice already in the middle of an argument. "Doing what?" "Turning everything into paperwork. Making me write to you like a stranger. Locking me out. It's like I'm not your son." "You are my son," I said. "That's why it matters how this goes." "I'm trying to help," he said. "By asking for access to my accounts. By asking for the combination to my safe. By asking me to sign a durable power that you call temporary." He was quiet for a beat, and then he said, "Tessa thinks." "Yes," I said. "I'm aware of what Tessa thinks." "Don't be cruel," he said. "I am being careful," I said, and then I let the silence sit. If you wait long enough, the noise shows its source. He exhaled. I heard the click of his jaw. "Fine," he said. "See you Thursday." "On time, please," I said, and when he hung up, I wrote the sentence in my log because it felt like a boundary even in miniature. The morning of the meeting, I dressed like a man who intends to be obeyed: blue shirt, pressed, gray trousers, the shoes my wife once called my courthouse shoes. She's been gone 12 years now, but I still hear her in my laces. I put the red pressure folder into my briefcase and slid the ledger in beside it, not because I planned to show the ledger to anyone but because having it near me tightens my thinking. At Daria's office, the air smelled faintly of coffee and exhaustion. She greeted me with a nod that meant I've set the table. We sat in a conference room with a glass wall. The city outside seemed flirtatious in the afternoon sun. On the credenza sat a small speaker. Daria tapped it as if to ask, "Ready?" I nodded. They arrived on time. Tessa wore a blazer that looked like authority in a mirror. Daniel wore his worried face like a tie. We exchanged greetings that were technically warm. "Thank you for coming," Daria said. "Today is informational. I will review Mr. Klein's estate plan. There is nothing you need to sign, and there will be no changes today. Please save questions for the end." Tessa smiled, grease over water. Daniel folded his hands as if the gesture could claim maturity. Daria opened a binder of her own. "Mr. Klein has a will executed last year and updated recently to reflect changes in beneficiary information. He has chosen me as his executor and as holder of his healthcare power of attorney in the event he is incapacitated. He has designated specific bequests and residuary distributions. He has also included a conditional clause, which I will describe in a moment." I watched Tessa's eyes brighten at conditional. She was hungry for hoops because she liked believing she could jump through any. "Before we discuss that clause," Daria said, "I want to be clear. Mr. Klein is currently healthy, competent, and under no obligation to grant any durable power of attorney to family members. He declines to do so at this time. He also declines to share his safe combination." She paused to let the sentence sit in the room like a chair. Tessa's smile held, but it had to work harder. Daniel shifted. "We weren't demanding," he said. "We were suggesting. We have received multiple requests," Daria said, sliding a sheet of paper from my folder without labeling it. "Including a proposed durable power naming Daniel as agent and Tessa as secondary. The request used the word temporary to describe a document whose legal name includes durable. That is misleading." Tessa drew breath to speak, then remembered the instruction to save questions. She nodded instead, a nod that reached for dignity and landed on restraint. "Now," Daria said, "about the clause." She glanced at me. I nodded. She continued, "Mr. Klein's will contains a condition subsequent, commonly called a forfeiture clause. It states that any beneficiary who engages in harassment, coercion, or exploitation of Mr. Klein, or of any other beneficiary, as determined by the executor based on evidence, including but not limited to messages, recordings, and testimony, shall forfeit their share. The forfeited share will be redistributed per a schedule already set forth." Daniel blinked. Tessa stopped nodding at last. "The word forfeit has its own gravity." To accompany this clause, Daria said, "Mr. Klein made a video at a notary's office on May 16th of last year. In it, he describes the clause in his own words, attests to his competence, and explains his intent. I'll play a portion." She tapped the speaker. My own voice filled the room, older in recording than in my head. "I want my legacy to promote respectful treatment. Not performative kindness, but the kind that protects. If someone pressures me, or pressures someone else in my family about my property, that person has told you who they are. Believe them, and take away their incentive to be that person." The room was quiet except for the hum of the building. "Questions at the end," Daria reminded. I folded my hands and unclenched them under the table. My breath was steady in my throat like a metronome waiting for downbeat. We did not invite theatrics, but they came anyway, trailing family history like confetti you can't vacuum. When the video ended, Daria paused the speaker and placed it gently on the credenza as if she'd set down a baby. Then she turned a page in her binder and said, "Evidence." She didn't have to explain. The air in the room shifted from warm to courtroom cool. She slid printouts across the table, not toward Daniel and Tessa, but toward the center, a small stage where paper could perform. These are messages and emails sent to Mr. Klein over the last 2 weeks, she said. They include repeated requests for him to sign a durable power of attorney for you, Daniel, mischaracterized as temporary, repeated requests for the combination to his safe, and a note affixed to his door reading, "Please don't make this harder than it is." There were also unannounced visits. Mr. Klein has kept a contemporaneous log. She tapped my red folder. Tessa lifted her chin. We were trying to be efficient. This feels like an ambush. An ambush implies surprise, Daria said. I emailed you the agenda. I told you we would review structure and conditional clauses. Daniel flushed. Dad, this is absurd. Son, I said, and the word felt expensive. Listen. He swallowed. His jaw worked. He looked not at me but at Daria, as if the authority he recognized might come from her instead of blood. I'm not saying you intended harm, Daria said. Intention is not the question. Conduct is. Mr. Klein has asked you to stop. You have continued. You have asked for authority you do not need. You have asked for private information that exposes him to risk. That conduct meets the definition in his will. Tessa spoke before Daniel could. Respectfully, the clause is overbroad. Families discuss powers all the time. They do, Daria said, and many discuss without pressing. Discussion is not a campaign. You planned an agenda that included confirmation of safe contents. That's not discussion, that's assumption. Tessa's lips flattened. Daniel leaned forward. Dad, just tell her you don't want to enforce this against us. I took a breath and let it out slowly. The clause exists to protect me and others from pressure. If I ignore it now, then it's only decoration. I don't make decorative protection. Daria cleared her throat. I'm going to read the clause aloud. She did slowly, the words walking their own path. When she reached forfeit, she enunciated as if she were introducing the word to the room. Then she slid another document forward. This is an acknowledgement of the clause's existence and your understanding of it. Signing is optional. Refusal to sign has no effect on its force. They didn't sign. Of course they didn't. That wasn't the point. The point was to make the air honest. No, Daria said. We will close with a simple directive. Do not contact Mr. Klein about his accounts, his safe, or his will except in writing through me. Do not come to his home unannounced. Any deviation will constitute further evidence of harassment. Daniel stood as if the chair had burned him. This is my father, he said. I have a right. You have a relationship, Daria said. Rights aren't feelings. Sit down. He sat. I don't think it was obedience so much as gravity. He looked at me then, finally, like a son looks at a father who has changed their usual choreography. I don't want to lose you, he said, suddenly younger. The sentence landed between us like a bird that wasn't sure whose shoulder to choose. You won't, I said. Not if we practice respect. I didn't look at Tessa when I said we. I didn't have to. Tessa cleared her throat. Just to clarify, the clause requires respectful treatment, Daria said. Kindness is not performance. It's pattern. If the pattern changes, so can the consequences. She closed her binder. We're done. In the hallway, Daniel tried to speak again. Tessa touched his elbow, and he let her guide him, as he always had. They walked toward the elevator with the air of two people who had studied for the wrong test. I stood with Daria while the elevator doors opened and swallowed them. You don't need me to tell you you did the right thing, she said. But I will. I wish I didn't, I said. I wish right felt kinder. She looked at me. Kindness without boundary is permission for harm. I nodded because nodding keeps you from crying, and I prefer to cry later in rooms with fewer windows. The days after the meeting felt slow, as if the house had been holding its breath and now needed to relearn how to exhale. I watered the plants and spoke to them, and not in metaphor. I said, we did something difficult. And the leaves accepted this without requiring explanation. The phone stayed unusually quiet. Silence has its own mass. It weighed on my table like a package I hadn't ordered. I made soup. I cleaned the safe even though paper doesn't notice dust. I wrote Daria a thank you card in real ink because real ink makes gratitude heavier in the hand. On Sunday evening, the quiet cracked. Daniel texted, "We need to talk. Tessa says the clause might invalidate my eligibility if we keep asking." "That's not fair." I typed and erased 3 sentences. Finally I wrote, "The clause is clear. Please take time to think. I love you." He wrote back, "Do you love me more than your papers?" I answered, "I love you more than conflict. That is why I am taking it out of the air and putting it on paper." 2 days later, Daria forwarded me an email from Tessa addressed to her. "We believe your interpretation of harassment is expansive. Our intent was care." Daria's reply was a photograph of the note on my door and a bullet point list of unannounced visits and repeated requests after no's. She didn't include commentary. She didn't need to. Evidence is its own argument. It wasn't until Thursday that the wheel turned. Daniel called, and this time I answered. "Dad," he said, his voice tired, "Tessa thinks you set us up." "I set a boundary a year ago," I said. "I recorded it at a notary. I hired a lawyer to make it formal. I told you no." "If that feels like a setup, maybe the problem isn't the setup." He was quiet. I could hear the kitchen clock in his apartment, or perhaps I imagined it, the way you imagine a heartbeat when you put your head to a pillow. "I didn't think it was a big deal," he said. "Temporary." That's what she said. "Words are either accurate or they are tools," I said. She chose the tool version. "Don't talk about her like that," he said reflexively, and then he exhaled. "I'm sorry. I know you don't like her." "I didn't say that," I said. "I said she uses language to get what she wants. Lots of people do. It doesn't make them demons. It does make them unreliable architects." He laughed, a short sound that failed to become relief. "So what now?" "Now you stop asking," I said. "And you come over for dinner next week without an agenda." "Just dinner," he said, tasting the word just and hearing it ring differently in my mouth. "Yes," I said. "Just dinner." We hung up, and I felt the house loosen a notch, like a belt after a good meal. For 3 days, nothing dramatic happened. I made lists. I cleaned the gutters even though they didn't need it. I went to the hardware store to buy a new set of screwdrivers I didn't strictly require. Aging men buy tools when they want to feel capable. On Saturday morning, I sat at the table with coffee and read the paper. The phone lay face down, a small black rectangle that sometimes pretends to be a person. At 11:06 a.m., it buzzed once, then again, then again. I flipped it over. "Tessa, we need to talk now." "Daniel, pick up." "Tessa, this is urgent." "Daniel, Dad, please answer." The messages came like hail. Then Daria's name appeared. I answered immediately. "They've sent me a letter," she said. "Tessa drafted it. It accuses you of manipulating the will to punish them and asks for a review." And I would have recommended a review even without a letter, because the conduct since Thursday meets the threshold. She paused. "I'm invoking the clause." I felt something inside me sit down. "Already? This isn't a punishment," she said. "It's a correction. They were warned. You asked them to stop. They've escalated. The clause says what happens next." "What happens next?" I repeated. "I will file a notice to the beneficiaries, including Daniel, that due to documented harassment and attempted coercion, their shares are forfeited as of today. The residuary portion will be redistributed per your instructions, to the scholarship fund you set up in your wife's name, and to your niece." I had almost forgotten I'd written that part. When we drafted the will, grief made me generous. My wife had been a teacher. A scholarship felt like a way to continue her handwriting in the world. "Do you want to reconsider the redistribution?" Daria asked gently. "No," I said. "I want my wife's name to fund kindness." I swallowed. "Send the notices." "Okay," she said. "I'm also sending them a summary of the evidence with an offer. If they cease contact for 30 days, attend a family therapy assessment, and agree in writing to respect your boundaries, I will recommend you consider reinstatement after a probationary period. The clause allows for that if you choose." "You thought of everything," I said. You hired me too, she said. And you were meticulous. After the call, I turned the phone face down again. I stared at the grain of the table. The house was quiet in a new way. Not held breath, not peaceful. Something like a clinic after hours, clean, fluorescent, waiting. The afternoon filled with buzzing. I didn't flip the phone. I went outside and trimmed the hedge I'd already trimmed. When you've done something irreversible, your hands ask for small tasks to remind them they still have scale. I made a sandwich. I ate it standing up. When I finally turned the phone over, the lock screen shouted 18 missed calls. I let the phone charge its own drama in the corner while I did a load of laundry. When it finished buzzing, I picked it up. There were voicemails, long and looping, texts that swung between apology and accusation, and an email from Tessa whose subject line read, rectification. Daniel had written twice, simply, "Dad, please." I didn't answer immediately. Mercy is best served after clarity. I took a walk around the block and nodded at the maple trees that have watched me age. A neighbor's kid waved, and I waved back, and the world didn't feel like it had ended just because I'd made a decision. That's something getting older teaches you. The world does not end for your clarity, even if some people act like it does. When I sat down, I called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. "Dad, I saw the calls," I said. "I read the letter. Daria told me what she filed." "She can't do that," he said. He sounded frightened, not angry, and I felt the ache fathers get when their sons tip from bluster into boy. "She can," I said. "Because I asked her to, and because you kept pushing." "Tessa says." "I know what Tessa says," I said. "This is between you and me now." Silence, then a soft sound like someone setting a glass down. "I'm sorry," he said very quietly. "I didn't see it that way." "You didn't want to," I said. "And she didn't want you to. Want has gravity. But so does consequence." "You really cut me out," he said. "It wasn't a question. It was a map he was trying to redraw." "The clause cut you out," I said. "Your conduct activated it. Daria left a door in it. If you want, you can walk through." "A door?" 30 days, I said. "No dings on my phone. Family therapist evaluation. A written agreement that you will respect my boundaries and stop discussing my will, my safe, and my accounts. After that, I will consider asking Daria to reinstate your share on probation." He breathed, a saw cutting into a tired plank. "Tessa won't like that." "You're 36. I said. "You can decide whether liking it is the right measure. You can also decide who gets to influence choices with consequences you carry." "I don't know if I can do 30 days, he said, honest. "You've done longer for worse reasons," I said. "Try." He didn't speak for a few seconds. Then, "I want to." Dad, I'm sorry." "Apologies late are still apologies," I said. "But they're not medicine you pour over an old wound. They're a plan for how to walk tomorrow." "I thought kindness meant saying yes," he said, "the way people confess a misunderstanding of arithmetic as adults." "Kindness means treating people as if their future matters," I said. "Including yours. Including mine. Kindness isn't weakness. It isn't a discount. It's precision." He made that almost laugh again, the one that asks for new muscles. "I'll call you in a month," he said. "No." He stopped. "I'll see the therapist. I'll send you the appointment time in writing. And I'll stop asking." "Thank you," I said. "Next week, if you want, we can have dinner. No talk of paperwork. Just food. Just dinner," he said, and the word just finally behaved. We hung up. The house exhaled. I called Daria to tell her he'd agreed to the steps, and she said good. She'd send him a summary and a contact for a therapist she trusts who knows about families and money and languages like temporary. That night, I sat at the table with my ledger. I wrote a new column header, Mercy. Under it I wrote, 30 days, therapist, written agreement. I drew a line underneath as if to keep the mercy from leaking into the rest of the page. Then I opened the safe and checked that everything was still there, not because I doubted it, but because the click of the tumblers is prayer to me, a small ritual that says, "This is yours to steward until it isn't." Before bed, I watched the notary video one more time, not to admire my own foresight but to remember my own voice. The man in the video seemed steadier than I felt some days, calmer, and I let him teach me. He said the word respect and looked into the camera like it was a person. I nodded back at him in the dark. In the morning, I wiped the kitchen counters. I watered the plants. I texted Daniel a recipe for the roast he likes and a line that said, "Kindness is not equal to weakness." He wrote back a simple heart. It sounds small, but small is how you build a structure that lasts. A ledger line, a straightened spoon, a refusal to confuse love with surrender. The house listened to my footsteps and recognized them. Outside, the gutters were still clear. Inside, so was I.